The first thing I wanted to talk about is, do you think this is a burglary or a kidnapping? And I want to start with you, Dr. Jordan.
I'm going to geek out on you for starters and remind you that a burglary is breaking and entering with the intent to commit any felony. So, by default, it's a burglary. The question is, what was the felony that was in mind when the intruder went in there? So, in other words, was it about a larceny? Was it about stealing belongings in the home? Could it have been about a sexual assault? Could it have been planned for homicide or for a kidnapping? I mean, there's many different possibilities of why that person entered that home. So it was a burglary, and I happen to believe at this stage of the game that it is more likely than unlikely that the initial, and I know I'm going to be disagreed with, the initial motivation was probably theft instead of kidnapping. I think that the abduction happened after the fact, after something went terribly wrong.
What do you think, Dr. Burgess? Because nothing was taken from the home.
Right, nothing was taken from the home. And of course, we don't have the crime scene to look at, which is very much a disadvantage. But I don't think they were there to steal anything.
And by the way, we don't know if anything was taken. Truly.
Right.
Just because the family doesn't immediately know that anything is missing doesn't mean that couldn't have been a motive. And we have to keep in mind that things could be taken that they're not missing, or that because something went terribly wrong, the entire motive immediately changed. And the idea of taking stuff out of the home became irrelevant, especially if she became injured. Because I think we both agree that something went terribly wrong.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
That something went south.
And we don't know how long he or she or they were there. They could have been there. I've done cases where they get in and they really surveil the house, they get familiar with it, they look at all kinds of things, and the victim is either sleeping or not awake, kind of thing.
We know about the 42 minutes from the cameras, but we don't know after that. Did they stick around?
Right.
You know, there's a lot we don't know, Ann.
I agree.
Burglary or kidnapping, Dr. Bricado?
I think it's important to bear some statistics in mind. There are only about 350 abductions that occur a year. The vast majority of them are committed against children, and the vast majority by people who know the child that is taken. It's also important to understand that, statistically speaking, an abduction usually involves proof of life and a demand for ransom within 24 to 48 hours afterward, and it's resolved usually in about a week. If you're abducting a person for ransom, you would consider them precious cargo. They likely wouldn't be bleeding and without their medication. You would be treating them gingerly because they're worth an enormous amount of money to you. I don't think truly that abduction was on the table. If it was, then it went very south, and I believe she may have expired, and as a result they wound up empty-handed and they wound up having to eliminate evidence of what happened to her physically. The other possibility that we must bear in mind is that the entire thing is masquerading as a burglary attempt with an abduction, where it's actually masking that somebody simply wanted to eliminate Nancy for personal reasons. And we do see that phenomenon sometimes, where someone who knows you desires to get you out of the way for some reason and then creates this idea of an outsider doing it. The clue to that is that the person generally is not sophisticated enough to fake one of the common reasons why somebody would break into a house, like robbery or sexual assault. Those signs are not there, so then what are we left with? So I think those are the two possibilities based on the numbers.
Nothing has been publicly confirmed as stolen from the home. But that alone does not fully erase theft as a possible motive. Sometimes a person enters for theft, then gets interrupted. Sometimes they panic. Sometimes a victim wakes up. Sometimes the situation turns physical before anything can be taken. Sometimes the original motive becomes irrelevant because the offender suddenly has a bigger problem. That is the danger of assuming the final outcome was always the original plan. A person may enter a home thinking they will take property. Then the resident wakes up. Then the resident sees them. Then the resident resists. Then the intruder realizes they may be identified. Then the entire situation changes in seconds. That is one of the theories the transcript explores, not as fact, as a possibility. Because the known facts allow for one thing clearly. Something happened at Nancy's home that led investigators to believe she was taken against her will. The public timeline is narrow and frightening. Nancy was last seen by family after spending the evening with them on January 31st. In the early morning hours of February 1st, a doorbell camera captured a masked man at the front door of her Tucson area home. He appeared to tamper with the camera. He wore gloves. He carried a backpack. A gun was visible in a holster. Soon after, Nancy's pacemaker app lost contact with her phone line. Later that day, relatives notified authorities that Nancy was missing after she failed to appear for church. That is the verified frame. Everything else has to be handled carefully. We do not know exactly how the person entered. We do not know exactly what happened inside. We do not know if Nancy woke up in bed, confronted the intruder, or was approached somewhere else in the home. We do not know if the person intended to take her from the beginning. We do not know if the plan changed. But the questions are unavoidable. If the person entered for theft, why was Nancy removed? If the person entered for kidnapping, why was there no clear proof of life? If the person came with a plan, why did the public evidence look so messy? If the person was acting alone, how did they remove Nancy and avoid capture? If the person was not acting alone, who sent him? That is why the burglary versus kidnapping debate is not just a label, it is a battle over motive. A burglary that turns into an abduction is one kind of offender. A planned kidnapping for ransom is another. A staged crime designed to look like an outside abduction is another. A personal motive hidden behind a fake ransom is another. Each path leads to a different suspect pool, and in Nancy's case, the public still does not know which path is real. The second major theory is that the crime shifted in the moment. This is where the case becomes even more tense. A plan can look controlled until a victim reacts. The masked person may have expected silence. They may have expected fear. They may have expected Nancy's age and limited mobility to make the situation easier to control. But age does not erase survival instinct. If Nancy realized someone was trying to remove her from her home, resistance would make sense. A person does not need to be young or strong to fight for safety. Sometimes resistance is a scream, a movement, a refusal, a grab, a stumble, or a moment of delay. And a delay near the front door could have changed everything. The front door was not just an exit. It was the line between the home and the outside world. Inside, the suspect may have had more privacy. Outside, there were cameras, neighbors, open space, and risk. If Nancy resisted at the threshold, that may have forced the person responsible to act faster, harder, and less carefully. That is where physical evidence matters. Blood found on the front porch was confirmed to be Nancy's. That fact does not tell the full story, but it tells us something serious happened near that part of the home. A previous analysis discussed blood patterns outside the door, and the idea that the pattern may point to a struggle near the threshold. But even without relying on interpretation, the confirmed fact remains powerful. Nancy's blood was found outside the home. Nancy was gone, and investigators believed she had been taken against her will. That combination creates one of the strongest questions in the case. Did Nancy reach the front door under threat? Did she realize she was about to be taken away? Did she resist there? Did something happen that caused the suspect to panic? Did the plan collapse at the doorway? The transcript raises another unsettling possibility. What if Nancy saw something? What if she recognized the intruder? What if she pulled at the mask? What if she learned something that made her dangerous to the person inside the home? These are not confirmed facts. They are investigative possibilities, but they explain why a simple theft could turn into something far worse. If the intruder believed Nancy could identify him, the situation changed immediately. The crime would no longer be only about property. It would become about exposure. That shift can drive panic, and panic can lead to decisions that were never part of the original plan. Removing Nancy from the house may have been part of the plan, or it may have been a desperate move after something went wrong. That difference matters. If removal was planned, the suspect likely had transportation, timing, and a location in mind. If removal happened after panic, then the suspect may have improvised. And improvised crimes often leave mistakes. But the public does not yet know which one happened. That is why the case remains so frustrating. Every clue points toward danger, but not toward a clear answer. The camera shows someone. The blood shows something happened. The pacemaker app marks a chilling break in the timeline. The ransom notes raise questions. The DNA leads have not publicly solved the case, and the person seen at the door has not been identified. The third major issue is the ransom. This is where the case stops behaving like what people expect. If someone kidnaps a person for ransom, communication becomes the center of the plan. The offender has to prove control. They have to make the family believe payment matters. They have to keep pressure on. They have to show the victim is alive, or at least provide something convincing enough to keep the negotiation moving. But with Nancy, the ransom layer does not publicly show that clean pattern. At least 2 purported ransom notes surfaced through media outlets. That alone makes the situation strange. A person who truly wants ransom usually wants private leverage. They want direct pressure on the family. They do not usually want the entire media world analyzing every move. Sending messages to media creates confusion. It brings attention. It invites copycats. It forces investigators to spend time deciding which message is real and which one is noise. It can also be used to manipulate the story. That is why the experts in the transcript question whether the ransom notes were legitimate. One view is that the notes may have come from opportunistic people who saw a high-profile case and tried to exploit it. Another view is that someone connected to the real crime may have thrown out false ransom messages to mislead investigators. A third view is that a ransom plan existed, but it failed after Nancy's condition changed. Each possibility is disturbing in its own way. If the ransom notes were fake, then someone used a family's fear for attention or money. If they were a distraction, then the person responsible may have tried to create a false story around the crime. If they were part of a failed plan, then the silence after the demand may signal that the person no longer had the leverage they expected. That is the part the profilers kept circling. A real ransom kidnapping usually needs proof of life. In Nancy's case, public reporting has not confirmed proof of life after the abduction. That changes everything. Without proof of life, the family cannot know who is telling the truth. Investigators cannot know whether a message is connected. The public cannot know whether ransom was the motive. And the person behind the crime, if they were truly seeking money, failed to do the one thing that would make money more likely. That is why the ransom story feels wrong. Not impossible, wrong. It does not move like a normal negotiation. It does not pressure like a clean ransom case. It does not publicly show the kind of proof that would turn a demand into a controlled exchange. Instead, it creates fog. And fog can be useful to an offender. It wastes time. It splits attention. It makes the family suffer. It gives the public something to chase. It makes every new message feel important, even if it leads nowhere. That may be why some experts see the ransom notes as red herrings. A red herring does not have to be sophisticated. It only has to pull people in the wrong direction long enough for the person responsible to gain distance. But even that theory raises a question. Who would benefit from making this look like ransom? That question leads to the darkest part of the transcript, the puppet master theory. The phrase sounds dramatic, but the idea is simple. The man at the door may not have been the person who planned everything. He may have been sent. He may have been recruited. He may have been paid. He may have been used by someone with a deeper motive. The profilers reached this idea because the person seen on camera looked strange in 2 different ways. On one hand, he looked prepared. He had a mask. He had gloves. He had a backpack. He appeared to understand that the camera mattered. He moved in a way that suggested he was not completely surprised by where he was. On the other hand, he looked careless. The way the gun was carried looked amateurish to the profiler. The use of plants or objects near the camera looked clumsy. The attempt to interfere with the camera did not prevent the image from being recovered. The whole presentation raised the possibility that this person was not a professional. That contradiction matters. Prepared but amateur. Confident but careless. Risk-aware but not careful enough. That is why some experts wondered whether he was a lower-level participant. Someone told what to do, but not skilled enough to do it cleanly. Someone given a task by a person who did not want to appear on camera. Someone who had enough courage or recklessness to approach the house, but not enough sophistication to avoid leaving a trail. If that is true, then the person on camera may not explain the motive. He may explain the method. The motive may belong to someone else. That is the terrifying possibility, because if there was a person behind him, then the case is not only about identifying the masked figure, it is about finding the connection between the masked figure and whoever sent him. That connection could be money. It could be a grudge. It could be a personal relationship. It could be a criminal arrangement. It could be a favor. It could be manipulation. It could be something investigators have not made public. The transcript uses the idea of a chef and waiter. One person plans. Another person serves the plan. That image matters because it separates control from action. The person at the door may have done the visible part. The person behind the plan may have stayed hidden. And if the person at the door was disposable, that changes the risk for him. A disposable participant is dangerous, while useful. But after the crime, that person becomes a liability. They know something. They may panic. They may talk. They may make a deal. They may get caught. They may expose the person who sent them. That is where the theory that the kidnapper may be dead enters the discussion. Again, this is not confirmed. No public evidence proves the person at the door is dead. No public source has identified him. No public source has confirmed a body, a confession, or an arrest tied to him. But the theory appears in the transcript because profilers were asking why no one close to him has come forward, why the case has not cracked publicly, and why a possible lower-level participant has not been found. One expert suggested he may have fled. Another raised the possibility that he may have been eliminated by someone else involved. That is the most shocking angle, not because it is proven, because if it were true, it would explain why the man on camera has not surfaced. It would also mean the person behind the case may have removed the very person most likely to expose them. That idea turns the case from a failed kidnapping into something more organized, more ruthless, and more difficult to solve. But it must be handled with precision. The script cannot say the kidnapper is dead. The script can say profilers discuss the possibility that the man in the footage may have fled, vanished, or been silenced. That wording keeps the tension without crossing into false certainty, and the theory creates a powerful question for viewers. If the man at the door is gone, who made him disappear? The next theory is the local connection. The experts in the transcript seem to lean toward the idea that the person in the footage had some familiarity with Nancy, the home, or the area. That does not mean Nancy knew him closely. It does not mean a family member was involved. In fact, public reporting has said immediate family members were ruled out as suspects. A local connection can be much broader. A person may know the home through service work. A person may know the neighborhood. A person may have done odd jobs nearby. A person may have delivered something. A person may have seen Nancy's routine from a distance. A person may have learned that she lived there. A person may have known of her, not known her. That difference matters. Someone can target a person without having a close relationship with them. They may have had passing contact. They may have been inside the home before for ordinary work. They may have seen the layout. They may have noticed doors, cameras, routines, or the fact that Nancy was elderly. That kind of familiarity can create comfort. Comfort is dangerous because it makes a person feel less afraid of the scene. A stranger with no knowledge of the home may move fast and nervously. A person who has been near the home before may feel more comfortable. They may know where to walk. They may know what to expect. They may know when the area is quiet. They may know that the resident is vulnerable. The transcript also explores the idea of gait and body movement. Even with a mask, people can sometimes recognize the way a person moves. A walk, a posture, a shape, a way of standing, a way of carrying the body. That is why investigators release footage. They are not only asking, do you know the face? They are asking, do you know the body? Do you know the walk? Do you know the backpack? Do you know the clothing? Do you know someone who changed after the footage was released? That last part may be crucial. If the man in the footage is local and still alive, the release of the images may have changed his behavior. He may have quit a job. He may have left town. He may have cut contact with people. He may have changed appearance. He may have gotten rid of clothing. He may have stopped committing other crimes. He may have become more withdrawn. He may have started following the case obsessively. He may have acted too calm. He may have acted too nervous. None of those are confirmed facts. They are the kinds of changes investigators may look for, and the transcript presses this point hard. Someone may recognize him, not from his face, from his movement, from his build, from the way he carried himself, from the timing of his disappearance from normal life. That is one reason the profilers wondered why no tip had cracked the case yet. The case drew massive attention. The images went everywhere. Thousands of tips came in, yet no public arrest followed. That could mean the right person has not called. It could mean the suspect left the area. It could mean the suspect has no close circle willing to speak. It could mean the person is already dead. It could mean investigators know more than they are saying. It could mean the case is waiting on DNA. That last point matters, because the evidence has not yet publicly delivered the breakthrough people expected. A glove was found about 2 miles from Nancy's home. It resembled the kind of glove worn by the person in the footage. DNA was tested, but the DNA did not produce a match in Cody's, and it did not match DNA found at the property. That was a setback. It does not mean the case is lost. It means one promising path did not give the simple answer. The public often misunderstands DNA. A DNA profile without a database hit can still matter. It can be compared later. It can help if investigators identify a person of interest. It can be used with other evidence, but it does not automatically produce a name. The same is true for other evidence. A backpack purchase may matter only if it connects to a person. A holster detail may matter only if it connects to a purchase or witness. A doorbell image may matter only if someone recognizes it. A ransom note may matter only if investigators can verify the sender. A tip may matter only when it fits the timeline. This is why the investigation can look slow from the outside while still being active behind the scenes. The public sees no arrest. Investigators may see hundreds of paths being checked. The public sees a dead end. Investigators may see a lead waiting for one more piece. The public sees silence. Investigators may see strategy. That is important, because current public reporting says the case remains open and active. No suspect has been publicly identified. Nancy has not been located. Law enforcement agencies have discussed cooperation and evidence analysis, even while public criticism has emerged over the early handling of the case. That criticism adds another layer to the story. FBI Director Kash Patel publicly criticized how the early investigation was handled, saying the FBI was kept out during critical early days. Pima County Sheriff Chris Nanos disputed that account, saying the FBI was promptly notified and that cooperation began without delay. For the script, this dispute should be included carefully. It matters because time is critical in any abduction case. It matters because doorbell footage became one of the biggest public clues. It matters because DNA and evidence handling are central to the investigation. But it should not become the whole story. The main story is still Nancy, the woman missing from her home, the masked man at the door, the unanswered motive, the possible failed ransom narrative, the theory that the person on camera may not be the true mastermind, and the possibility that the case may not be solved by a dramatic arrest, but by one small crack. That is how the transcript ends in spirit. The experts do not present one final solution. They present possible routes. One route says this began as a financially motivated abduction, then went wrong. Another route says this began as a burglary, then became something worse. Another route says the whole scene may have been staged to hide a more personal motive. Another route says the man on camera may have had a boss. Another route says the man on camera may have fled. Another route says he may no longer be alive. Another route says the answer may come from DNA, a witness, a later arrest, or recovered evidence. The power of this case is not that one theory answers everything. The power is that every theory leaves one fact standing. Someone knows what happened to Nancy Guthrie. Someone knows whether the man at the door acted alone. Someone knows if he was sent. Someone knows where he went after the footage was released. Someone knows if the ransom notes were real. Someone knows if Nancy was moved by one person or more. Someone knows where the missing piece is. That is why the case still feels alive. Not because the public has all the answers, because the public has just enough truth to know that the silence does not make sense. And silence, in a case like this, is never empty. It protects someone. It hides something. It delays justice. It forces the family to live inside uncertainty. That uncertainty is the most painful part. Nancy's family has asked for information. They have offered a major reward. They have pleaded for her recovery. They have faced the possibility that she may no longer be alive while still holding on to hope. That is the human cost behind every theory. The profilers can analyze motive. Reporters can connect facts. Investigators can test evidence. The public can debate possibilities. But the family lives with the empty space. A chair where Nancy should be. A call that never came. A church service she never reached. A home that no longer feels like safety. A question that does not end. Where is she? That question must stay at the center of the video. Not the masked man's mystery. Not the ransom drama. Not the profiler debate. Nancy, because every clue points back to her. The masked figure matters because he may know what happened to Nancy. The ransom notes matter because they may reveal whether she was alive after the abduction. The blood matters because it marks a moment in her disappearance. The pacemaker timeline matters because it shows when her normal connection to life broke. The DNA matters because it may one day identify the person responsible. The local connection matters because someone near the case may recognize the truth. And the kidnapper may be dead theory matters only because, if true, it would change how investigators find the person behind him. If the man at the door fled, the trail may lead through movement. If he is alive, the trail may lead through recognition, DNA, or a witness. If he is dead, the trail may lead through whoever benefited from his silence. That is why the theory is so unsettling. It opens a second mystery inside the first. Not only what happened to Nancy, what happened to the man at her door. The final part of the script should bring every thread back to one idea. This case may not break because someone confesses on camera. It may break because one detail finally connects. A person recognizes the gate. A lab gets a match. A witness stops protecting someone. A phone record places someone near the home. A discarded item gains meaning. A person arrested in another case enters the DNA system. A location is found. A small lie falls apart. A person who thought time protected them learns that time preserved the evidence. That is how many cases move. Not with one thunderclap. With pressure. Slow, quiet, constant pressure. The person responsible may believe the world has moved on. They may believe the mask worked. They may believe the camera showed too little. They may believe the ransom confusion helped. They may believe the glove lead failed. They may believe no one can prove what happened. But investigations do not always move in public. They move in labs. They move through databases. They move through interviews. They move through old footage. They move through calls that did not seem important at first. They move through people who finally decide they have carried a secret long enough. And if the profilers are right, the weakest link may already exist. Maybe it is the man at the door. Maybe it is the person behind him. Maybe it is someone who helped after the fact. Maybe it is someone who noticed behavior change and stayed quiet. Maybe it is someone who knows the man vanished right after the footage became public. Maybe it is someone who knows he never came back. That is why this case still has tension. Because the story may be closer to breaking than it looks. But the public cannot see where the pressure is building. For now, the facts remain sharp. Nancy Guthrie was last seen after an ordinary family evening. A masked man appeared at her door in the early morning. The camera was tampered with. Her pacemaker app lost contact. Soon after, her family reported her missing when she failed to appear for church. Her blood was found at the front porch. Purported ransom notes surfaced through media outlets. No known direct contact from suspects has been publicly confirmed. A glove DNA lead did not produce a CODIS match. Family members were publicly ruled out as suspects. The FBI reward remained active. The family offered up to $1 million for information leading to her recovery. The case remains unresolved. No public suspect has been named, and the man at the door remains the figure everyone can see. But no one has been able to publicly identify. That is the haunting contradiction. He is visible, but hidden. He is the clearest clue, but possibly not the center. He is the person caught by the camera, but perhaps not the person who made the plan. He may be alive and hiding. He may have fled. He may have been used, he may have been silenced. And until investigators know which one is true, Nancy's case remains suspended between theories. If you want careful true crime coverage that follows verified facts and avoids reckless accusations, like this video, and subscribe to True Crime Greyson. Cases like Nancy Guthrie's deserve attention, but they also deserve responsibility, because behind the mask, there is a person. Behind the ransom questions, there is a motive. Behind the silence, there is a truth. And behind this entire case, there is a missing woman whose family still needs answers. The final question is not whether people have theories. They do. The final question is, which theory survives the evidence? Was it a burglary that collapsed? Was it a failed ransom kidnapping? Was it a staged crime? Was there a hidden mastermind? Was the man at the door a hired hand? Did he run? Is he dead? Or is he still close enough to the case to watch every update and wonder when the next piece will fall? No one outside the investigation can answer that yet. But one thing is clear. If the man at the door was only the hand, then the person behind him made a mistake by trusting him. And if he is still alive, fear may eventually do what evidence has not yet done. It may make him talk. If he fled, distance may not protect him forever. If he was silenced, then the person who silenced him left another trail. And if the whole ransom story was a cover, then sooner or later the cover has to explain what it was hiding. That is why Nancy Guthrie's case remains one of the most unsettling investigations of the year. It began with an elderly woman vanishing from home. It moved through a camera image that shocked the public. It raised ransom questions that did not behave like a normal ransom. It produced forensic leads that have not publicly solved the case. And now it leaves profilers asking whether the person everyone is looking for may have already disappeared himself. But the truth does not disappear just because a suspect does. It waits in evidence, in memory, in movement, in a call someone has not made yet, in a person who knows more than they have said. And somewhere, in the silence around Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, there is still one missing piece. When that piece finally comes forward, it may not only answer what happened to Nancy, it may reveal whether the man at her door was the monster everyone feared, or only the shadow of someone worse.